Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hedin, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in Mesa, Arizona. Floor Academy is here to help you go from owning a job, which is where most contractors are at, their owner-operator level. They do everything themselves. Nobody wants to own a job. That's not why we go into business. I want to get you owning an asset so that other people can do all the things you hate. You don't have to do the marketing. You don't have to do the selling. You don't have to do the deliveries if you don't want. All the things you don't like, somebody else can go do, and you get to focus on the things you actually enjoy in life. That's how running a business should be. And if you want to find a way to completely pull yourself out, the tools are here within the episodes. This week, I have Dana Dowdell of Boss Consulting HR. I know what I'm doing. I swear. Trust me. I'm real read up. So she does essentially like fractional HR for small companies. If you can't afford to have somebody on full time, or your company's just not big enough to really warrant that, you call her up and she will help guide you through the waters of human resources, because I know as contractors, that stuff kind of goes out the window. Like the compliance charts for OSHA or minimum wage posters. Like, I work out of a trailer. I don't have an office. Where does that stuff go? Well, it should go on your trailer wall, but we'll get into that. So before we get started, I want to jump in and let you know that for over 65 years, Laticrete has been a leading manufacturer of products and systems covering tile and stone installation, masonry veneer installation, resinous and decorative floor finishes, concrete construction chemicals, and concrete restoration. They offer an array of low VOC and sustainable products. Their products contribute to LEED certification, exceed commercial and residential VOC requirements, and are backed by the most comprehensive warranties in the industry. For more information on Laticrete and the products they offer, visit laticrete.com. Dana, welcome to the show. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? What's kind of like your overview, your background? How did you get to owning your own kind of HR consulting company?
You want my elevator pitch, basically.
You got a couple minutes. We don't need the 1 minute pitch. I'll gladly give you, 5 minutes, however long you need.
Perfect. So, I got into HR straight out of college. I did not know what I wanted to do when I first went to school. I found myself in an accounting program and just found myself in a track that I think a lot of people find themselves in, where they're studying something and they're not sure what they wanted to do. But I found human resources as a field, essentially, or a specialty, and I just fell in love with it. HR to me is like the perfect mix of true crime, which I love, right? Investigations and people doing bad things, and then therapy, which I also love. And it's like the perfect melding of those two areas. And so it just was where I knew I needed to be. And so I worked in the field for other businesses for about 8 years. I worked in luxury hospitality. I worked in the nonprofit world. I worked a lot with unions. And in 2015, I decided that I was going to start my own business. And I did it the same way that I think a lot of people do it, I started it as a side hustle. So I was working my regular job, and then I would come home and, be at my kitchen table working on a handbook. And by 2017, I was busy enough on my own to take it full time. So I quit my full-time job. I bought a house first, because buying a house on self-employed income is like climbing a mountain, and I didn't want to do that. So I bought a house first, and then I quit my full-time job. And I've been full-time consulting ever since. And the business started around this idea of, all my jobs in HR were working for companies that had the budget, the number of employees, the business, the revenue, the challenges to warrant having a full-time HR professional on staff. And I recognize that for the small business, the 100 employees or under, they didn't have that budget, they didn't have that need. And so that's really what I wanted to focus on, is providing the education and support to small businesses to keep them out of trouble, but to also allow them to compete against these larger companies when it comes to recruiting and benefits and all of that.
I think your description of why you enjoy it, of like true crime mystery with like psychology and therapy, is probably the most interesting way I've ever heard an HR position described. But yes, everyone's going to come and be like, he did this and they're not following the rules. And then you have to like talk everyone off the ledge. Right. So I get like, yeah, who done it? And let's get you to shut up and go sit at your desk and get some work done.
And I'm a big rule follower. So like I get anxious calling 911 even for a valid crime. So like I love the rules. I love to follow the rules. And so this is just, human resources is very much where I'm supposed to be.
That's awesome. And it's something that, like, you know, I said in the intro, right? This is, contracting businesses are generally, you know, it's one guy, maybe he has somebody else that's, you know, an apprentice or at his level, and rules are out the window. It's, you know, hey, we're just two guys doing our thing. If you get hurt, don't say anything. Go, you know, wrap it up with a towel and call it a day, or, you know, just shut up and go home and suck it up. Like there's not a department to go to if you actually get hurt. Like it's the guy that owns the business, and well, most likely he started the trade doing the trade, and that's what he knows. There is no generally business knowledge beyond that. So where do we even need to start? Where do we begin this journey as small businesses to start tackling HR? What does it mean? What do we even have to implement to have some form of it?
So I think there's two schools of thought when it comes to human resources, right? There's the compliance, the things that I absolutely have to be doing and should be doing. And then there's the best practice, which is the things that are voluntary and optional that can really help you from a strategy standpoint. I always like to say in my industry, you know, it's nothing is a problem until it's a problem. And that there are businesses that go 10, 20, 30 years without having the right posters, without having, you know, people categorized correctly, and it never comes back to bite them, right? They never get in trouble for it. They're never subject to an audit. And so that does exist. And those are far and few between stories. And so I like to focus on the what if. Like, what if you get Department of Labor that's calling you and asking you for your payroll records because you were selected as part of a random audit? You want to make sure that you have those things in place, done well, before Department of Labor calls knocking or comes knocking versus after. So I usually say the best place to start and the most important place to start from a compliance perspective is your paperwork right? So are you collecting the things that you are legally required to collect from employees in order to stay out of trouble? And that usually looks like your tax forms, and then this form called a Form I-9, which basically verifies someone's eligibility to work in the United States.
Is that really, absolutely required these days, or is that still optional?
It was never optional.
Oh, well, all right. Okay.
So if you have, but to that point, right? And I think that this is common in your industry, and it's common across a lot of small businesses, but it's only if that person is an employee. So if you're paying them as a W-2 employee, they're on your payroll, we're running them through payroll, you have an obligation to do that Form I-9. Okay. If you just have subcontractors, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Good to know. honestly. And the I-9 is not hard. You need to have them show you a passport, or they can show you a driver's license and social security card. I filled out lots of them in my lifetime. There's other
But be
options too,
careful.
but those are like the two easiest ones to go. Oh, okay. Hold on. What
Yeah.
do we got?
Well, you want to be careful not to tell people what they have to give you,
Okay,
only
yeah.
because that could be viewed as discriminatory.
There's a list on the backside of the paper that tells you all the acceptable documents, but generally the easiest things you're going to get is from somebody is a passport or their driver's license and the social security card. It's interesting, and I don't want to go down the W-2 versus 1099 thing and employee misclassification. I got an episode talking about that stuff. Go dig through the archives. There's like 1099 versus W-2. Misclassification of employees, it runs rampant in the construction industry. It's absolutely horrendous. I'll put it to you this way. We'll sum it up real quick. If you're paying somebody hourly and you're providing them with all of the tools, they're an employee. If you give somebody a work order and they bring all their own tools, you can 1099 them. We're done. We're going to move on. That's the simplest, clean cut definition that I can give you without getting into a lot of details. And that's not why we're here today. But okay, so we actually have to like get somebody a W-2 so we can issue a W-4, and other way around, W-4, and then we issue a W-2 at the end of the year. If they truly are a subcontractor, you can do the 1099 thing. You got to get an I-9 for employees. Okay. So we got basic paperwork. We've got a real legit employee.
Yeah. And you got to check with your state too. So I happen to be in Connecticut, and Connecticut has specific laws around making sure that the terms and conditions of employment are provided to employees in writing. Not a lot of states have those, but you want to be mindful around what state are you doing business in, and do they have specific requirements about onboarding employees?
So you'd actually have to give somebody a legit like job description with like what their pay starts out at and like fully detailed.
So in Connecticut, you do. You don't have to give them the job description, but
okay.
So that this goes back to what's legally required versus what's best practice. So like in Connecticut, that's legally required. It's also a really good practice.
I believe it. There's no miscommunication, right? Everything's clearly detailed out. And I'm a big detail guy. And I think a lot of contractors are details. They're just, these details are like, it's no big, like, that's not a big deal. Like making sure the job is functional is what matters. But why we struggle in this industry to have employees lies in you saying, well, in Connecticut it's required, but some places it's not. Check with your local state. But it's a good practice, right? If it's a good practice and some states require it, it's probably just good to do because now everything's clearly communicated. So I like that. That's very helpful. Like, here, this is how you hire an employee. This is how you let them know this is how it all works. Here's what you're getting.
Well, and think about it too. Like, think about the last job that you had to go to before if you're listening and you're self-employed, like what's the last job you had to go to? Did they tell you where you should park? Did they tell you what to wear for your first day? Did they, give you all the information to make you feel comfortable for your first day? Or did they just tell you to show up at 8 a.m. and ask for John and left it with that? The experience that you give an employee, whether they're a barista or a VP of finance or a mason, the intentionality can go into all of those onboarding experiences and make it a better experience for the employee. So yes, doing an offer letter can be cumbersome, but building some structure to your onboarding process can communicate to the employee that, we're a legitimate contracting business. We are superior above the rest because we make sure that everybody that comes into our organization is well cared for. So that's the balance of compliance versus the softer side of HR.
Okay. Well, no, and once again, I really like it because I think a lot of guys and gals get into it, right? They meet Bob down the street. They're 18 and Bob has a contracting business and he's like, "You're not doing anything over the summer. Why don't you come help me out?" Okay, well, I need a job. I'm 18. I got bills to pay, right? Or maybe you're 16 and you start then or whatever and you just work the summers. But like, you don't necessarily get formal experience of working for a larger company that's going to onboard you in the way you're talking about. So that experience is never something that you would consider doing for a contracting business. But once again, why does everyone think we struggle to keep employees in this field? There's no structure behind our businesses and how we handle employees. So this is game changing. Like you said, if you want to be that premium service around and be different and stand out, this is one way that you can do it by having a proper onboarding process. So
yeah, there's this great, they're a landscaping company here in Connecticut, and his onboarding process is that every employee, when they start their first day, there's a parking spot with their name on it. And something as simple as that, it's like, we're ready for you. We're excited to have you. And it sets the tone for the rest of their employment. Yeah. And those little things can be taken for granted, but can make a huge impact.
I totally agree. Where do we go from here? We've brought somebody on. We've got proper paperwork. Oh, that's what, you know what? Is there a certain way I have to store this stuff? Because now I've got people's social securities numbers like just laying around my house.
Yes. So it is, employee information is protected information. So an employer has a duty and an obligation to store that information confidentially. So if you have a payroll system, some payroll systems have the option to store things electronically. If you don't, and you're just writing checks manually, or maybe you're using QuickBooks in the basic form of QuickBooks, you might resort to paper files. So best practice is to keep those files stored in some type of locked cabinet so that no one else can access it. If you're storing them electronically, you want to make sure that you have the appropriate safeguards that, that information can't be accessed. And the big thing, and I always see small businesses mess up on this, keep the I-9 out of the employee file. So the I-9 should actually be stored separately. My favorite way, it sounds so weird, my favorite way to store an I-9 is just get a binder, a 3-ring binder, and you can keep all of them alphabetically in that 3-ring binder and keep that 3-ring binder locked up, but you don't want to keep it in the employee file.
Why? Really? Why? Because the other form has a social security. Like, I don't get it.
So it's not a problem until it's a problem. And this is like employment law, the weeds of the employment law, right? People's passports, people's green cards, they all have national origin on them. So where someone was born, right? Which is a protected class. And so if you take that information completely out of the file, it can help protect you if someone was to come and make an allegation that you were discriminatory against them for a particular reason.
All right, fair enough. I mean, we're discriminatory anyways in construction, right? Like we're just horrible people, and we just fire people on a whim and do whatever we want and yell and throw trowels at people. And so, we're just, all right. Keep your I-9 separate in a separate binder so that you can't be considered discriminatory. No, look, it makes sense. It really does. And so I get it, because if somebody else has to go through the employee file and they see something and they want to hold it, somebody's origin against them, you've given them that information. And so, all right.
It's also for audit purposes too, right? U.S. Customs and Immigration can come in and give you 3 days notice that they'll give you to audit your I-9s. And so when you have them all separate, it's just much easier to only give them the I-9s that they're auditing versus the entire employee file.
Okay. Yeah. You just have a book, I don't need time. Here you go. We're all done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you had a company go through that?
I have, so I have been hired on the tail end of an I-9 audit. They were actually being investigated for hiring illegal workers. And so they were having their I-9s audited. So I came in at the end to try to maintain some best practice going forward.
Okay.
The fees and the fines associated with I-9 can be pretty hefty. And I think it's worth recognizing, like, the contractor industry has been known, or the hiring
Yes.
practices are not the most appropriate sometimes, and so you have a target on your back as an industry, unfortunately.
Yes. I would, like, you can drive by a big box store and tell them you need two, and your truck is magically filled with two workers for the day if that's how you want to operate your business. Like, you can do that. So let's not. There's rules and regulations for a reason. This is how we go about running an actual sustaining, long-term, profitable business. Is you gotta play by the rules. Can you skirt the line? Probably, but there's rules, right? Like, you can kind of weave a little bit in and out, but you're generally going to be better on the correct side of the line than the other one. So we can bring somebody on. Another lacking thing, I've done an episode on it, but I'd love to hear your perspective as an actual HR person, and highly missing from many, many small companies is employee handbooks, or just a like company guide, or something that gives me information about how anything in the arena of this business operates.
So I'm going to tell you a story from early on in my career. So this is my second job working in human resources, and it was in a luxury hotel. And we had an employee who was drinking on the job. He worked in the restaurant, the fine dining restaurant. And so he was found to be filling paper cups with this really expensive red wine and drinking while he was working. And so we fired him, right? It was against our policy, against our handbook, and we fired him. And he went on to file for unemployment. And this was back in the days when unemployment hearings happened via telephone, and they contacted every employer. And so I get on the phone with the officer that's overseeing this claim, and she says, why did you fire this person? And I said, well, he was drinking on the job. And her direct response was, how did he know he wasn't supposed to be drinking on the job? And
I laugh, and you laugh, but it's, why has it come to this that it has to be written down? But okay, it's written. Let's get it written down.
Well, and so my jaw was on the floor, and I was kind of like, seriously? Isn't it common sense you don't drink on the job? And for you and I, right, the business owner, yeah, we carry ourselves in the most professional way. But in hindsight, right, I've written handbooks where they get a shift drink and they can drink when they're closing up, and that's their company policy. And so when it comes to having handbooks, generally you don't need one. There are some states that do require you to have like written policies and procedures and benefit summaries and that type of stuff. But what a handbook can do is it can really help establish what are the expectations for this employee every day that they come to work. What are the expectations around attendance? What happens if they show up to work intoxicated, and what's the best practice to handle that? How do we expect them to care for the tools? What happens if they don't care for the tools correctly? What happens if they completely botch a job intentionally? Like, do you have any recourse as the employer? So all of these things that happen in the employment relationship, a handbook can really help define what the expectation is around those. And it can protect your business, right? If someone was to, let's say, bring a suit against you for discrimination or harassment, and you had a policy that clearly outlined the appropriate reporting channels to
Mhm.
report discrimination and to report harassment, that can really help you as a defense if someone's pursuing action against you and they didn't go through those channels.
Yeah. I learned early on when I worked at a large package shipping company in like very low level management dealing with the union, document everything. It doesn't matter if you train the person, if you have a conversation about their day, you have to reprimand them for document everything, because there's a track record then, right? You have like something to go back to and say, you know what, we're going to fire you because of X, Y, and Z. We've dealt with this 15 times. I'm sick of telling you the manual says you get 5 warnings and you're at 15. Like we're done now. And I'm assuming that would help you when, in cases of termination and then somebody coming and trying to file like a unemployment claim, right? You're going to have the documentation needed to fight the claim so that it doesn't sting your company.
Absolutely. And I hear this a lot. Connecticut's a very employee friendly state. My former boss used to call it the People's Republic of Connecticut. And I have small business owners who will say, you can never win an unemployment claim. And really the issue is that they haven't done the work while that person was an employee to defend against an unemployment claim. So handbooks can be incredibly helpful for a defense, but they can also be a really good tool when it comes to that strategic component and bringing some formality to your business as an employer. If you have a handbook and you sit down with them and you go through the handbook with them so that they know what the expectation is, that sends the message that you're a legitimate business and that everyone that you hire hears that message that like, I've got to show up to work on time. They take a lot of pride in the work that they're doing. These are some fantastic benefits they get, or, it's the script for the work experience, essentially.
Okay. Now you'd mentioned like, if somebody damages a tool purposely, or how can we handle that? Because I know that there's a lot of times when a contractor will be like, you ruined my stuff. Like I'm going to take it out of your check. Well, my understanding is I can't really do that. Like, unless it's like maliciously done and it's a super expensive piece of equipment, like having an employee comes with costs, right? Like you're kind of there to, they break a $40 tool and maybe it's by accident. Like I can't take that $40 out of their check and hold them accountable for it. That's just kind of the cost of being the business owner. And then we just have to train them on how to do it properly. So where's that line, and how do I do it properly so that I can hold employees accountable if they're just being complete a-holes and idiots?
So kind of across the board, and again, this is going to vary state by state, there are specific rules about what you can and cannot deduct from an employee's pay without their authorization. So let's say that you give every new employee that works for you a hammer and a drill. Like that's what they get upon hire. You can have them sign some acknowledgement when they receive that if they intentionally or negligently damage those tools, that you are allowed to take the cost of those tools out of their paycheck. So that's one way that you can mitigate it, is on the front end when you're giving these items to people, communicating the message that like these are a gift, these are essential for doing your job, and you are supposed to take pride in them and you're expected to take pride in them. And if you don't, it'll be deducted from your paycheck.
Okay.
So that's step one. Step two is kind of, it's tricky because to your point, Kyle, when you have an employee, if they mess up, that's your responsibility as the employer, essentially.
Yes.
So unless you're able to show like willful misconduct, like someone, I don't know,
they purposely drove the forklift into my truck, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I threw the tool in the pool because they were pissed off at something you said. Like
right. But
yes.
even then, you don't really have a recourse as an employer unless you've done the work on the back end and the front end to have them sign off on the acknowledgement that you can deduct it from their pay. And then you would just choose to document it from a progressive discipline standpoint or firing for performance, right? That's a performance issue. If they choose to intentionally damage a tool, that's a performance issue. So you would document it that way or terminate.
Okay. But having this employee handbook or, like company handbook set up front, everybody gets one. They have to read through it, initial at the bottom of each page that you've read, sign at the back that you've completed it, you understand it, all this stuff can be in there, and then it's easier to hold them accountable on the back end, as well
Absolutely.
as all the fun stuff goes in, right? You're talking about your holiday pay or holidays and whether you get them off, how we do scheduling, when we expect overtime, can you turn it down? How do we figure out if we're going to work the weekend? How do I have to properly notify you to be respectful of your time and my time and the customer's time? What else? There's tons of things that you would put in this, but now somebody has a clear picture of how you operate, how you communicate, how they need to communicate with you. And once again, this isn't something I see in a lot of small contracting businesses. And then once again, everyone's saying, I don't know why no one sticks around. Well, it's because every time you have the situation with somebody, like on Monday, they didn't do something and you yelled at them and you screamed your head off. And then on Tuesday, they did the same thing, but you had a lot of patience with them. And now they're just completely confused. And so on Wednesday, they decided not to show up because they're sick of dealing with you. And then on Thursday, they come back and you're screaming at them again. Whereas if there was just a consistent, playing field for everybody, how much more successful can you be?
Yeah, there's a really great quote that's like the fastest way to ruin a good employee is to watch you tolerate a bad one. And so, it's just like laws, right? Laws are not written for the good employees, right? Or good people or the people that follow them. Laws are written for the people who don't follow them. And having these policies within your business are for when those situations come up, that you have kind of a guide on how to handle them and that you handle them consistently each time, so that you can exit someone from your company if they're not working out. I want to mention too, with a handbook, one of the most important things, and you can put this in an offer letter, you can put this in a handbook, is an employment at will statement. So just a written confirmation that the relationship between you and your employee is entirely at will, meaning they can leave at any time with or without reason, with or without notice, and vice versa. You as the business owner have the option to terminate their employment with or without notice for any reason, as long as it's not discriminatory.
Okay. Does that get around like loopholes in the system of not working in a what's it called? I don't know, in Arizona where I can't think of the term, like an at-will state. It's not an at-will. There's no repercussions. Like I can just fire anybody anytime I want. Like I don't have to have that in a statement, right? Like but I know there's probably other states where like it's required, like you have to have a reason to like terminate people, right? So is that why a right to work state, right? So like that's what I'm looking for, right? So if you're not in a right to work state, does this kind of get you around that law or rule that's in place to be able to just be like, you know what, this isn't working out, you got to go?
So I think it's Montana is the only state that doesn't have right to work. And it's after 6 months of employment. So if somebody's employed after 6 months, employment at will basically does not exist. I believe it's Montana, but
okay.
It doesn't necessarily protect you against employment at will, right? Because sometimes employers will be like, well, could they come after me and sue me for wrongful termination? Absolutely. Anybody can come after you and sue you for wrongful termination. You could be doing all of the things right, and they could still come after you and sue you for that. What having those employment at will statements in your handbook and your offer letters does is protect you from anyone claiming that there was a contractual obligation to keep you employed for any period of time. So let's say that your business is super seasonal, right?
Yep.
It would protect you from someone saying, well, he hired me last summer. He's obligated to hire me this summer.
Got it. Okay. Good to know. Definitely, you don't need that, especially, as a guy running, myself, like work goes up and down and up and down. And some weeks I may need somebody, some weeks I may not. And so if I bring somebody on and I have an employee at the time, I try and keep a full schedule to the best of my ability. But things happen, I like to take vacations. Maybe they're not ready to like handle a project on their own. So they got to sit at home for a week. Could you find a way to maybe pay them some money and make that easier on them? Sure. Be the good guy. But no, I think that's really good advice to make sure you have some kind of clause in there to make that possible. Where do we start taking this, right? So now we can hire somebody, we can give them proper documentation to get them in the door, and they understand the rules that we're playing by. We forgot, right? You can put in like drug tolerance policies and alcohol policies. All that good stuff goes in the employee handbook. If you don't have one, literally you can Google it and start finding just rough free versions. But I would have it checked out by somebody like Dana that's in your state and can make sure it fits all of your state's requirements. But there's tons of free stuff out there, and it'll just start asking you information of like company name and different things, and then it just kind of plops in the facts you've entered and puts together like a rough book for you.
Check with your payroll provider. So some of the larger ones like ADP, Paychecks, they have templates that you can use. That's usually part of your service, and they have all been checked by an attorney. Or else they wouldn't be pushing them on their clients. So if you don't have a budget to have one done for you, I would check with your payroll provider to see if there's one that they have that you can at least start with.
Okay. So we're through hiring, we're through onboarding. I would highly recommend job descriptions. Once again, something that's not done in this industry, but you will. If you can tell somebody clearly how they advance in the company and what's expected of them, your relationship with them moving forward will be much better than somebody that you're just every day. Look, I get it. It's construction. No 2 days are the same. And we generally move through projects in a linear fashion. And so you can't have somebody learn how to just mix thin set all day, every day, right? You can't keep moving the new guy from project to project to project, do the same thing. He can't just tear out for 3 months straight unless you're a giant company. So a job description, kind of what's expected, the overview of it, just so they can even see it written out like, okay, we move through projects in this order and we're always going to move through it in that order. And the minute you write it down, you have to move through it in that order. You can't start skipping around, and you're held to a standard, which is probably a good thing too. So we've got them on. Where do we go with them now? Like what are the, those are like the big HR things I think get left out, but what's all the behind the scenes stuff that a small company doesn't even realize HR does and handles and that we need to be concerned with?
So, again, some of this is like state specific, but some states require new hire reporting in a certain manner. So you want to make sure that when you do have that new employee, that it's appropriately communicated to the state. And then once you have an employee, and truthfully, this is not an HR responsibility in most large organizations. This is a management responsibility, but HR is usually the one leading the charge, is that your employees need to be encouraged, trained, supported, directed, right? The US culture of work is that people want guidance, they want structure, they want direction. And so those types of things have to continue to happen even after someone is hired.
Oh, get out of town.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your lies.
No. So like, I think right now the job market's hard, right? We all know that the job market's really hard.
No, I just saw something. They added like 315,000 jobs. It's okay, people. Don't worry. And finding employees is easy right now, especially for contracting. I promise.
No, it's really hard, but it's hard across every single industry, right? No industry is having any luck. The employers that are having luck and doing well are the ones who did the work 2-3 years ago, kind of creating the messaging and the culture and the workplace that they were intentional about, so that when they do hire people, they are coming into a place where what they're being told the work culture is like is actually happening.
Okay.
So, when it comes to hiring people, the things that you speak to them about in the interview process has to actually happen once they come on board. And that happens through training and mentorship and guidance. And sometimes that means finding someone who maybe doesn't have, 100% of what you were looking for, but maybe they have 65% and the right attitude. Those are the people that you can train, that you can teach a new skill, and they tend to stay with you longer, is when they feel that mutual trust and that mutual engagement.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt
this. It's frou-frou-y. It is frou-frou-y.
But it's not. And once again, this is what contracting businesses are missing. And if anybody didn't know, I was full of sarcasm earlier. Like, hiring is abysmal right now. I know that. And the job reports that keep coming out saying we added all these. I'm like, who, where? Because everybody still has hiring signs up. Like, and service still sucks everywhere. So I don't know where these people are getting these numbers from, but it ain't near me. I'm going to interrupt us, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about why even offering training and having a way to do that is so important. So it's time to make your plans to travel to Las Vegas with me to hit the show floor at the International Surface event. Our sponsor, Tice, has provided me an incredible offer for my listeners. You can now register for a free exhibits pass with the code Kyle, that's Kyle, for those of you who can't spell my name. Registration is open online at www.intlsurfaceevent.com/register. It's all happening in Las Vegas the 31st of January through the 2nd of February in 2023. Plus, don't miss the special podcast episode this December, which will give you the inside scoop of what's happening at the event. Homeowner tenure is at an 8-year low, with average length of ownership being 6.31 years. During ongoing times of building material supply constraints, does a 25-year or lifetime warranty on your materials really mean anything anymore? John's Manville Go Board offers a limited 10-year manufacturer warranty on all its products and a list of approved alternative products covered under our warranty. Don't hold up your project because you can't piece together a full system. Visit www.jm/GoBoard for more information. jm.com/GoBoard. Sorry, folks. New ads, they're hard. I'll get used to them. It'll take about 12 weeks all in, and then I'll get new ones, and it'll take about 12 weeks all in to get used to those. Dana, thank you for putting on. You're having a blast over here. You're like, what did I sign up for? Who is this nutcase?
Well, because I know the contractor industry, right? Like I've had a roofer client. Like I know this is like someone coming to them and saying, here's all the things that you need to be doing. And I think this is across businesses all over right now. Like we're trying to survive. We're trying to grow. We're trying to get more business, get more contracts, get more leads, right? I'm not trying to add more to my plate for paperwork, and it's never been a problem before. So I know that in this industry in particular, they're probably all rolling their eyes at me, which
I
is
hope
fine.
not. You know what? The people that listen to this show probably aren't rolling their eyes at you. It's the ones that I try to get to listen to the show and they're like, nah, I don't need that. I've been doing it 20 years. Well, okay, great. You've been probably doing it wrong 20 years, but that's okay. I understand the importance, and it's one of those things where you can't constantly work in your business. You have to work on your business. And yeah, look, it's overwhelming to go look at an employee handbook and try and figure it out or come up with a job description. Like, I get it. But 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day of just actively like working on something for your business to move it forward is going to make all the difference in the absolute world. Having that company culture that Dana's speaking of, being able to bring somebody on and treat them the way you say you're going to treat them, to be able to bring them in and guide them through, have it clearly laid out how you get raises and move up the ladder, right? Like, a lot of people, the young kids, everything you see online talking about, like, people don't go and work 40 years and get the Rolex at the end anymore. That's not happening. They jump companies every 2 or 3 years, and a lot of that is because there's no way to advance up the corporate ladder at those companies. And so if you have the company that clearly defines how you move up and you're looking to grow and scale, where do I want to be? The place that I can grow, or do I really want to deal with jumping from here to here to here to here, constantly looking for like, where's my next job? How much can I put into my job if I'm always looking for my next job? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. There's a better way. We just have to change our mindsets in the construction industry to say, what I was taught doesn't cut it. This can't work anymore. So how do I actually run a business? How do I make people feel happy to come to work, enjoy it, and advance them? I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was talking about that a lot of times we are the experts, right? Like, we go in and we know everything, and we're going to do it. And like, us as the owner, we want to win. Well, if you're not letting your employees win, then they're kind of just like servants, and they're going to be really miserable. So you have to step back from that like win-win-win mentality and teach your employees how to win and move forward so that you can win overall. But that's a really hard concept for contractors, I think.
Well, in business in general, think about how much ego you have to start a business, right? You're going into it thinking you have the best idea, right? That's why you start a business, is because you have the best idea. And so to let that ego go is challenging. There's a great author and a speaker. His name's Dan Pink, and he does this really fantastic TED Talk. It's maybe 18 minutes or so. And it's his theory of motivation or theory of engagement. And he says that you need 3 things, right? You pay people a fair wage, that's separate. But in order to really encourage engagement, you need to give your employees a sense of mastery, right? So a skill, like an opportunity to really become an expert at something, which as a contractor, like, your opportunities to do that are incredible. A sense of autonomy. So not being micromanaged and being able to kind of have a sense of autonomy over their day, over their schedule, if possible, and a sense of purpose. So those 3 things, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, are the keys to high levels of engagement in your organization. And finding the right people, right? They will really soak up that opportunity to master something. They will be connected to the purpose that you are doing and living in your company. And giving them those opportunities will keep them engaged and keep them highly engaged. And then they'll stay longer, which is nice.
But that's what we want, right? Everyone, like I said, everyone's trying to move on, and I don't want that. We glanced over something a little earlier. I want to come back to it. I got a buddy that runs a company, and we were having a conversation. He was like, I just feel like I have to cater to like the biggest idiot in the room. And so this guy had hooked up a trailer, and he hooked it up to the wrong receiver, like the wrong ball size. And so it could have popped off. And so now everything in their company is like, if it's a 2-inch ball and receiver, it's spray painted yellow. If it's a 2 1/4, 2 5/16, whatever it is, like it's spray painted pink, like both halves. Like you have to turn the one part and like make sure that, you know, that both pink colors go together. Like it's kind of hard to screw up now. And so we were talking earlier about the employee handbook and laying things out. And you were like, you kind of have to like really what's common sense to a lot of people, and maybe it's not a lot of people these days, sadly, right? Everyone says common sense is not so common anymore, but we're catering to the least common denominator. Like who's the biggest doofus around that we have to protect ourselves from? And while it sucks to do that, how much does it protect you? Because now everything's explained and listed out, and you can't argue with, these are the rules, folks. Like we follow these, and this keeps everyone safe, whether it's common sense or not. Is that really what we're looking to kind of do with a lot of this stuff?
Well, yes. And consistency is really important from the employee experience, but also to protect an employer, right? If you can if you can prove you consistently did the same thing over and over again, and there was no deviation, that protects you as an employer. So though it might seem cumbersome and time consuming to spray paint these things, you're outlining, here's the hard line. Here's the expectation, right? You can't mess this up. And if you do mess it up, it is a big deal. And I think it's easier for people to connect with the mishap if there's a really clear line and a really clear expectation around it. I will also say doing things like that, you know, having your processes outlined, having scripts, having step-by-step workflows, that helps training. You know, let's say you have someone who has an interest in roofing and has like helped their dad do it once or twice, but doesn't really have a lot of experience, but they have a really good attitude and a really good energy, and you feel like they're really trainable. Having those things that seem like common sense, but maybe aren't common sense to someone who doesn't work in the industry, that's going to make them feel more welcome, more supported, and help them in their training and their onboarding. Having employees is the long game. It's not the short game, right? This is like,
yes,
this is like a labor.
Well, I think that's the other part, right? A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to hire somebody. They're going to do it for me. It'll be A-okay. Okay. Well, do you want to hire the new guy and train him up so there's no bad habits? Or do you want to hire the guy with the bad habits and then fight those? Are you okay with them doing it however they want as long as it gets done? Well, their way may not be your way, and then there's going to be miscommunications, right? Like, once again, you're running a company. There has to be a set standard of procedures and processes and how we get from point A to point B, so it's duplicatable over and over again. Ray Kroc, you know, I say this all the time, like Ray Kroc didn't go and franchise McDonald's because the system didn't work. And the McDonald's brothers themselves, like, set up shop and played with it and the order and how the employees moved and balanced and went all around each other and what's the most efficient way to make a burger. If you don't think your small business needs systems and processes, you're kidding yourself. Like, there's no way this is going to work without this stuff. Like, if you just want to own a job and do some contracting, like, that's cool, right? But there's more beyond it, and it's going to take a lot more than just showing up and being able to do the skill that's necessary. You're going to have to actually build something that has a framework around it. And without it, you're not going to go anywhere because everyone's going to be trying to go their own direction. And it's just, it's a hot mess.
It's playing small, right? It's playing small. If you don't want to have this structure and build these things into your company, you're going to limit yourself and limit your earnings potentials because you're not going to be able to manage your employees well. And your employees are what allow you to grow.
Yes. And then, we started talking about having a clearly defined path for them and being able to do that. When you give the employee where they're going, they can more easily move ahead, right? If you tell them when you know X, Y, and Z skills, you're going to get 50 cents an hour raise. There's no question, right? Especially young kids, like they're intimidated to go to the boss and ask for money. They don't know how. No one's ever told them. Even my son was doing yard work for grandpa. And he came home and told me what he made. I was like, no. You go back to grandpa and you tell him I want this amount of money. I was like, no, that's not right. Like you're over there for way too many hours working way too hard for grandpa. You need to get paid better. Right. And so usually like a parent steps in, but what if they don't have a parent? They're out on their own now. They're young 20s. What do? Well, they're either going to have to wait to get their standard 3%, which isn't going to do anything for them. Or you can lay out, when you have X, Y, and Z skills, we can look at putting you here or paying you this, or you can become a crew lead and that equals this. And then, in the future, we'll bring on somebody new and you can get the trainer role and we'll give you another couple of dollars an hour for being able to train somebody. And then once we have enough crews, you can become the foreman. Like where are you going? Where can they go? Why do they want to buy into your vision and your ideals? There's something. So is that something that needs to go in the handbook? Do we need the vision statement, the mission statement, our, core values? Like, is this all? I think that's not communicated enough. Like I know them for me, but the employees don't even have any clue what's going on.
Yeah, they can go in your handbook and they should be thread through every single thing that you do. You can plaster them throughout your organization if you really want to lean into it, but they need to be communicated. And, we talked a little bit about culture, right? This idea of a company culture. Unless you are intentional about what your company culture is, your employees will shape it for you. And so you really want to be mindful of is this the kind of organization that I want? Is this the kind of company that I want? Or did I let Larry, who chain smokes 30 cigarettes a day and speaks inappropriately to my employees, create my culture, right? You have to be very intentional about what your culture is. And that starts with communicating what your values are, communicating what the mission is, communicating what the strategy is, or what the goals are of the organization. Because you can't get buy-in from an employee to help you reach your goals if they don't know what the goals are.
Well, it'll help you find your employees too. If you're hiring people that go against your core values that you've set for yourself and your company, how's that going to work? You're wasting your time and their time. So you can use that. Go back, listen to Aaron Albrecht's episode where we do a mock interview, and that gets really uncomfortable for me because I couldn't even fake answers for an interview. I had to answer them realistically, and they were hard. But it's a great episode. And so she's even looking at how, trying to get that stuff out of people and compare their answers with what the values of the company are and whatnot. That's high level stuff. She's running a very successful tiling business in San Antonio. And so once again, it's just overlooked by the small guy that brings one guy on because I just need a warm body. I just need somebody to go sweep the room for me or bring me material or mix this thin set or whatever it's going to be. And yet that's not what you think that's what you need, but it's not what you need. You need 15 other things and you're just overlooking them. And then you get frustrated when you don't get those 15 other things, but it's because you never communicated with that employee what you wanted.
Yeah. And that's all you're going to get. If you just hire a warm body, all you're going to get from them is what a warm body does, right? It's not, if you're not getting their buy-in, they're going to do very little for your organization as a whole.
For sure. Is there anything that we should have hit on that we haven't touched on yet? And there's probably many things, but is there any, we have a couple minutes left. So I just want to make sure that if there's any one key area that's this is the thing I really would love to key in on. Like, I don't want to miss that.
Well, we talked about the, 3/4 of the employee life cycle, hiring, onboarding, and training during their employment. Your exit process is something that you want to look at as well.
Okay.
So from a compliance standpoint, there are some states that have certain requirements around when you have to give them their final paycheck, that type of stuff. But from a business owner perspective, you want to protect your business. So when you do terminations or when someone's leaving your organization, you want to try to mitigate all risk that you possibly can. So collecting any items that belong to the company, making sure that you get those back, making sure that if it is a resignation, that you get that resignation in writing from someone, something other than just a text message. Screenshots of text messages are the worst forms of communication, and I hate using them when I have to defend something. Like, have them write you a letter. But really, making sure that you're protecting the integrity of your business, the intellectual property of your business, the physical property of your business when someone exits your organization is really critical.
Okay. Exit interviews. Are you a fan? Not a fan?
I'm a fan as long as you do something with them. They often just go in a file and nothing ever happens. There's no kind of action plan around them. I'm a bigger fan of stay interviews, or what we call pulse checks, which are 5 to 10-minute conversations over the course of the year where you're checking in and you're asking like the same 5 questions or same 8 questions every single time.
Okay.
Because then you can make a change, right? They're giving you some tangible stuff to make a change with while they're still employed, not when they're out the door.
Mm-hmm. And if we can correct it while they're still employed, then we can build that better, healthier culture and environment for them, so they should stick around as opposed to exiting and then leaving you stuck. Because here, people don't necessarily realize what it costs to hire someone. Like, they look at, okay, I had to buy a set of tools. It took me a couple of weeks, okay, maybe it cost me a couple $1,000 to hire somebody. Well, okay, but what about your time invested in hiring? How much did it slow you down? What did the additional insurance cost you? What did you have to buy extra uniforms? There's a lot more costs that go into it than just the time. And then even with the time, are you accounting for all of it? And so it's going to cost you way, way more to hire somebody new and go all the way through this again, trying to get somebody up to speed, than it is to make one little change, like, not yelling at somebody or treating them respectfully on the job site. Little things, saying thank you. Look, yes, I understand you hired an apprentice and you send him the tool to get or to the van or truck to get a tool, right? When he comes back, just say thanks, man. Little things will make people much happier to do things. Like, they're not your slave. They're not your gopher, even though, yes, they technically are your gopher. I get it, but we can be respectful. And this isn't like this isn't even like a snowflake thing. This is just a human kindness thing. I didn't like getting yelled at as like a, Gen Xer, by like boomers and stuff, just yelling at me, you suck, you can't do it right, like whatever's happening. All that does is frustrate me, and I want to work the minimal necessary to not get yelled at again. But if you can take me and teach me the lesson of how I can actually do this more successfully, now I have a skill that you've taught me, and I have respect for you because you're so wise and kind, and you're helping mentor me up so I can be successful in your company and help us, if I succeed, you succeed. Your yelling didn't help anybody succeed. You got to yell, and what are you going to do? You didn't train me, so it's going to happen again. So then you're going to yell at me again and again and again. Great. We're not getting anywhere.
Right, it's just a cycle.
So I don't blame people for leaving. That's it. I don't. Not a lot of contracting businesses. I can't keep anybody around. I wonder why.
Well, something as simple as saying thank you, right? Like
Hmm.
that could have a huge impact in your organization. If you do nothing else, right? But you just make an intentional effort to thank your staff for what they do, for what they contribute, not just a blanket thank you, but a thank you for all your hard work that you put into that
Hmm.
hardscape project, right? That again is tying them to that sense of purpose that can be so impactful.
Well, and you got to be genuine. You can't just say it to say it. Like, you actually have to be genuine and care.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's
Get your ego out of it. You have to get your ego out of it, give people credit where credit is due,
mhm,
and show appreciation for even the smallest contribution.
correct. And it's not. I had something. It's out the window. That's okay. Um, Dana, I really appreciate you coming on. If people have questions for you, or they would like, help with something, I don't know if you try and keep everything you do to within Connecticut, but there's listeners nationwide, there's international listeners. If somebody wanted to reach out to you because they have a question, where can they find you? How do they reach you? And you actually, you know what? I did so horrible. You have your own podcast. So, get all your plugs in.
Sure. So you can go to www.bossconsultinghr.com and go to the contact page. My email's on there. You can reach out. And yes, I do have a two podcasts actually. So I have a business podcast called It's Just Business with my dear friend Russ Harlow. And then I also have an HR podcast called Quirky HR, where we share lots of fun HR content for people who like the true crime side of what HR is.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I very much appreciate your insights and your time. I think it's very helpful for people to see why they kind of need to implement some of this stuff. We didn't even get into like mandatory posters, but hey, look, if you hire employees, you got to have some posters around about, how much you pay and how they file workman's comp claims. And even though you don't have a permanent place of business, if you got a van or a trailer, put them on the walls in the van and the trailer, because that's kind of your main operating center. So that's that one summed up real quickly. But they are important. And no, you don't have to buy them from the company that calls and like asks you if you want to buy the posters. You can go online and like print free versions. So you don't have to get ripped off by these companies that are calling you because you registered a new LLC and they see that and they say, hey, you need this stuff. No, I don't. I'll go find it elsewhere. What's the name of them again? Just ask them for what the names are. Then you can go Google it and print them out. But all right, folks, we're going to wrap it up there. You can find more at flooracademypod.com, whether you need help with your business budgeting and figuring out what to charge a day, or you want to track your equipment, maybe do some job costing. Heck, we even got the store over there. You can pick up some really awesome hoodies and shirts. The new thing is we've got our Embrace the Suck shirt, and we've got our Profit is Not a Dirty Word shirt and hoodie. You can help support the show over at patreon.com/Floor Academy. And, do me a favor, head on over to YouTube, look up Floor Academy, hit the subscribe button, and let a friend know. If you see the post on Instagram or Facebook about the podcast, leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of the episode. Help that algorithm really pick up with the content and get it out there to more people so others can get the same success you are having from the show. That's it, and we'll catch you next week.